I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Well, we're through the Memorial Labor Day celebration, the end of the state fair. What a beautiful weekend it was. What a beautiful day it is today. So here we go, sort of headlong into the final stretch in the 2024 presidential election. And it's going to be exciting. A lot of news, a lot of information, a lot to pay attention to, a lot at stake. Well, I want to sort of focus on some of the issues, some of the stories that are being presented across various media platforms. We're sharing some articles that we've been noticing and getting and giving some feedback. Co-hosting with me today is my friend and colleague, Jonathan Palmer. Jonathan, good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too, Al. Glad to be here.
And we may have a couple of other guests joining us as well over the course of the hour, but we're going to start. Your title, for those who are watching the radio but can't really read the subtitles on our screens here, Nonprofit Heroes for Hire LLC. Let's take a minute to give you a chance to introduce the concept and the business Nonprofit Heroes for Hire.
So thank you, Al. What it is working with various consultants to work within the nonprofit sector. The nonprofit sector has been one that's been very important and very key for our world. During the pandemic, the nonprofit sector is what kept the world going, and the impact that we have around the Twin Cities and around the state of Minnesota is huge. And so this LLC that I started is to take experienced consultants, experienced former executive directors, and connect them into nonprofits that may need them. A lot of times when you get a consultant in, you can get somebody who comes with a cookie cutter solution that doesn't actually fit your needs. Utilizing people who have been in the field for a number of years, who have connected in, who have run their own nonprofits, helps to ensure that you're getting something that is customized to you, that helps ensure that the community continues to move forward and the kind of support they need is there.
That's awesome. Well, listen, good luck with that. And let's report in from time to time on things that you find and discover in your journey in that arena. Well, before we get into talking about some of the articles that we've pulled up to talk about today, I want to tell our listeners here on KFAI, thanks for listening to this program. I often am in stores like over at Seward Co-op or the Wedge, or places like let's say French Meadow Restaurant, and I'll see people and they'll hear my voice and say, "I recognize the voice. You're on KFAI." And I say, absolutely, and thank you for noticing. Thank you for following and checking out this work on KFAI. So I'm grateful to KFAI for the important work that we do, creating what we used to call a different radio station every hour. This is a unique platform that involves people from Somali, from Asian, from Latino, from other European ethnic and cultural traditions. And I think it's a great model for how we reflect the reality of who we are and who we can be with each other and for each other in community. Kudos to KFAI. And again, I'm so glad to have been a long-standing programmer on KFAI. Well, I want to share my excitement and my gratitude to KFAI listeners and people on other platforms as well. If you're interested in getting a pair of tickets to the Minnesota Twins baseball sometime this September or before the season ends, I'm creating an opportunity for you to do that. Compliments of the Conversation with Al McFarlane. And as you know, we not only are live broadcasting here on KFAI and KFAI.com, but we're streaming across Facebook, across Twitter, across LinkedIn, and across YouTube. And what I'll ask you to do in order to get at in the running for a pair of tickets to a Twins baseball game is simply make a comment saying with the word baseball in the comment section at the YouTube uh, Insight News MN channel. Just that lets us know who you are, where you are. We'll reach out to you and let you know if you're one of the ones that is lucky enough to get a pair of tickets to a Minnesota Twins baseball game. We'll also remind you that here at KFAI, we've got our fall membership drive coming up September 12th, 25th. That's a big deal. It's an important deal. And we're going to let you know now that we are counting on you as people that listen to and support the Conversation with Al McFarlane to show up supporting this program, supporting the station by becoming a member of KFAI and by pledging to make your financial contribution to support this program. So we'll keep talking about that. We are excited about it. We're thankful for being here. Well, let me look at the issues today. I looked at several sort of trending topics, and I'll just mention them generally, and then Jonathan, you and I can jump in wherever we want to.
Mhm.
But one of the things I want to talk about maybe is an article in the Washington Post on yesterday that talks about protests continuing in Israel and the outcry over the Netanyahu hostage strategy. That's one topic. Two, continuing on the same topic, Israel disruption as strike and protests push for a Gaza hostage deal. Another article from National Public Radio that says Israel's labor strike over hostages is called off after a court order, and a final article about that we might review over the course of this hour is Netanyahu pushes back against new pressure over Gaza and hostages. He says, no one will preach to me. And that is an article that comes from the Associated Press. We'll share that with the course of the hour. Also, we're paying attention to, obviously, the Harris-Walz campaign. And this is related, it's a pivot, but one of the news items on Fox News says that Harris's team may be open to a quote unquote new direction on Israel policy, that according to Representative Ro Khanna. Another article is that Harris is courting the union vote with President Joe Biden at her side. That's an article that comes from Reuters news service. We might talk about that. And it's about her campaign in Pennsylvania with the president, Joe Biden. And she also was talking about her fighting for reproductive freedom during the bus tour last week in Palm Beach County. So those are things we can talk about. Jonathan, what's on your mind as you're studying the news events over the past several days? What stands out to you?
The Israel right now, and Israel and Gaza is at the top of everybody's mind, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And, Netanyahu is, I don't know how you get him to understand that he's not reading the room, he's not reading the situation, he's not understanding. And this he doesn't look like a leader. It looks like rage and it looks like revenge, and that is the whole of the piece. He has some points to bring up in terms of protection of Israel, but it's been at the cost of everything else. And this kind of indignation of no one will preach to me, without understanding that without the support of the U.S., they have no standing to be able to carry on any of these campaigns. So this indignation that he has, it is really unfounded, and it's detrimental to actually coming up with any kind of a solution or being able to develop a hostage deal that will bring hostages home. Right now, the primary concern should be bringing those hostages home and then creating a solution. And the two-state solution is the best option I think that's on the table right now. But doing a way so that we can get past the war, because the only people who are getting hurt are people that are caught in the crossfire. And that's Gazans, that's Israelis, that is Americans who are over there. It is innocent lives that are being, and this is really cutting off your nose to spite your face, and it does not help in terms of coming up with a solution. So I don't know what we're gonna do, and I'm sure the Blinken is pushing things as much as possible, but we're at a point where something has to change, something has to shift, just like it did with Kamala Harris. The change that happened with the Democratic Party, and not just the Democratic Party now, it is members of the Republican Party, it's independents, it is people, it is Americans. That right now we're at a point where what you're seeing is America uniting behind Kamala, not just a party. And that was all due to Joe Biden graciously stepping aside and allowing this to go forward, and promoting Kamala Harris and her stepping into the spotlight, grabbing the reins and moving far like we knew she could. So something of that nature needs to happen over with Israel. Somebody needs to step in. Netanyahu needs to step back because he's got a single focus and it's not helpful.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm talking with Jonathan Palmer, who's co-hosting with me today, along with my friend and colleague, Youssef Mgini in Dougal. Youssef Mgini. Youssef, good to see you, my friend. Let's bring you in to the studio here. And thank you for being here. And we're talking broadly, Youssef, about the situation, the latest news in the Israel-Palestine, Gaza conflict, linking that to our monitoring the Harris-Biden campaign and the national politics. What's top of mind for you right now as you look at the headlines over the weekend?
Afternoon. Let me say good afternoon, Al, Jonathan. It's good to see both of you. Sorry I'm late. Had some technical issues. I want to disagree respectfully just on 2 points that Jonathan made. Number one, Netanyahu understands this situation quite clearly, and it is to his advantage to remain in office and with the war ongoing to prevent having to go into court for the charges of bribery and corruption that he's been indicted for. Number one. Number
that sounds
two,
familiar.
The murder of the 8 hostages in one of the tunnels in Gaza, who were each shot in the head, complicates matters because it increases the anger of tens of thousands of Israeli citizens who blame Netanyahu for not resolving the conflict sooner and entering into a ceasefire and meaningful peace talks. Number three, the murder complicates things because it emboldens Netanyahu and gives him what he feels is additional justification for continuing the destruction of Gaza, 62% of which has been leveled already. More than 40,000 dead, more than 93,000 injured, including members of the media, more than 100 health workers, aid workers, and 500,000 people facing what the United Nations characterizes as significant hunger shortage, food shortage, and in effect that 500,000 people are starving to death. So we've got an intolerable murder of hostages, 8 hostages on the one hand. We've got an emboldened Netanyahu who has publicly stated on numerous occasions that there will be no two-party state in his lifetime. He's been very clear about that. He's also stated to the United States and other allies that if necessary, Israel will go it alone. That's his decision, not the decision of the Knesset or the citizenship, the people of Israel, who essentially are blaming him again for not coming to the peace table, for not implementing mutually beneficial peace talks, and for not, holding off on the unnecessary death and danger and destruction of the lives and the territory of Gaza and the West Bank at the same time. So this puts the Harris campaign in a tight position because, one, they're just now establishing their foreign policy, foreign relation positions, which she, as the vice president, has not had the opportunity or the privilege to do up to this point. She's basically been carrying Biden's water, going down the middle of the road, supporting Israel, its right to defend itself, and saying that the unnecessary death and destruction and hunger are regrettable in Gaza. And I think that the world court, having charged Israel and Hamas with war crimes as a result of the October 7th attack, the deaths that have occurred since then. And I should point out that some hostages have been killed as a result of Israeli warfare, bombing, shooting, attacks, the leveling of buildings that some hostages were in. As Donald Trump has said, there is fault on both sides. And we really have to acknowledge the unnecessary deaths on both sides as unacceptable and needing to stop immediately. But, we now have Iran involved. We have who's shooting rockets into northern Israel? I forgot the name. Jonathan, do you recall of the
Hamas.
Muslim group? No, it wasn't Hamas. It's another group.
Hezbollah, perhaps.
Hezbollah is firing rockets into northern Israel. Iran is supplying arms and weapons and soldiers for all of the offensives. And we're on the brink of a Middle East war that could cause the deaths of unnecessary deaths of tens of thousands of people if it escalates. And if the United States gets involved in that, if China gets involved, if Russia gets involved, we're on the threshold of World War III. That's how unstable the region is and how critical this situation is. Now, let me talk for a minute about the divisiveness, okay? Because we've got not only the Christian right-wing evangelists, we've got congressional people who are Christian Zionists who would do anything that Israel requests. If it's more planes, bombs, money, whatever, the Congress seems to be only too willing to fan the flames and put wood on the fire, because many of the weapons resulting in the death and destruction of Gaza and the deaths on the West Bank are supplied by the United States. And that angers Iran, it angers Hezbollah, it angers Hamas, and throws wood on the fire, in the occupied territories. So we have this complicated conflict that is not just 170 years old when Israel was created in 1948 and occupied 12% of the land, but now occupies 82% or more of the land in what then was called and should actually be referred to as Palestine. Now, that does not suggest that Israel does not have the right to exist or to defend itself, but that a two-party state has existed for some time, although the Palestinian state is increasingly shrinking. And during the Carter administration, the 1967 peace agreement declared specific lines for Israel and Palestine not to be encroached. And Israel just continues to build settlements in the West Bank, in the occupied territory, giving Palestinians overnight to take whatever they can carry and leave, and then bulldozing olive orchards that have existed for thousands of years, bulldozing the houses of Palestinians and building settlements for new Jewish citizens in Israel. And a Jewish person anywhere on the planet is automatically also a citizen of Israel. So when we talk about American deaths in Israel, more than 10,000 Americans have left the United States and gone to Israel to join the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, which is waging the war in Palestine, in Gaza, and in West Bank to help Israel retaliate for as a direct result of the October 7th attack. So there are a lot of dual citizens who have died in this conflict, who are being referred to as Americans, but are Americans with Israeli citizenship who are members of the Israeli Defense Force. And that's not being clearly communicated. They appear to be American tourists or Americans who dropped from the sky like Topsy from Mississippi and just happened to be there and were caught up in the conflict. That's not the case. Other than the hostages, including the American hostages, American Israeli citizen hostages, were still being held. So these are some of the reasons why this is one of the most divisive issues that our country is facing, alongside the divisiveness of the presidential election in 5.5 weeks, that could alter the course of this country in innumerable ways. And I'm sorry for rambling.
That's fine. Let me jump in here with a couple of articles that we can use to highlight the conversation we've had so far. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guests, Yusuf Mgini and Jonathan Palmer. I say guests, but they are my co-hosts today, my companions and friends and people that are knowledgeable that I enjoy having this conversation with, and hope that you enjoy the conversation as well. Well, one of the articles, Yusuf and Jonathan, was one in the world news section of the Associated Press. The headline is Netanyahu pushes back against new pressure over Gaza and hostages. And here's where the quote comes in. No one will preach to me. This is an article that was posted at about 9 o'clock last night, September 2nd, written by Tia Goldenberg with a deadline of Tel Aviv, Israel. She writes, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday pushed back against a new wave of pressure to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza after hundreds of thousands of Israelis protested and went on strike, and U.S. President Joe Biden said he needed to do more after nearly 11 months of fighting. So in his first public address since Sunday's mass protests showed many Israelis furious response to the discovery of 6 more dead hostages. Netanyahu said he will continue to insist on a demand that has emerged as a major sticking point in talks: continued Israeli control of the Philadelphia corridor, which is a narrow band along Gaza's border with Egypt, where Israel contends Hamas smuggles weapons into Gaza. Egypt and Hamas deny it. So Netanyahu, the article continues, called the corridor vital to ensuring Hamas cannot rearm via tunnels. He says this is the oxygen of Hamas. A couple more paragraphs here. Netanyahu also said, no one is more committed to freeing the hostages than me, but no one will preach to me on this issue. Israelis poured into streets late Sunday night in grief and anger in what appeared to be the largest protest since the start of the war. The families and much of the public blamed Netanyahu, saying the hostages could have been returned alive in a deal with Hamas. A rare general strike was held across the country on Monday. That's one of the articles And then the other one is one that comes out of, I think, the BBC. The headline is Israel disruption as strike and protests push for Gaza hostage deal. This was written by David Gritton and Robert Plummer for BBC News. And it's an article that I think was published a day ago. The article says Israel's biggest trade union has said hundreds of thousands of people have joined the general strike it called to put pressure on the government to agree to a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal with Hamas. Businesses, schools, and transport were disrupted before a court ordered everyone to return to work, ruling that the Histadrut's strike was largely political. Thousands also took part in fresh protests called by hostages' families to express their anger at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's failure to bring home their loved ones after almost 11 months. The article says tensions have been running high since the bodies of 6 hostages were found on Saturday. Israel said they were shot and killed by Hamas. Many accuse Mr. Netanyahu of blocking a deal to prioritize his own political survival, a claim that he rejects. His far-right allies have threatened to pull out of the coalition government, undermining his chances of staying in power if he were to accept a deal tied to a permanent ceasefire before Hamas was destroyed. The Israeli military launched a campaign to destroy Hamas in response to the unprecedented attack on southern Israel on 7 October, during which about 1,200 people were killed and 251 others were taken hostages. The last paragraph here, more than 40,780 people have been killed in Gaza since then, according to the territory's Hamas-run health ministry. Carnage, carnage, carnage. Any reaction, Youssef, Jonathan?
Jonathan, please.
I go back to the fact that I think Netanyahu is not understanding and reading the situation in a way. I agree with you, Seth. He's reading the way he wants it to, and keep it to his advantage. But in terms of what's right for the people and what's right, I think, this is like if you remember that late scene in Remember the Titans when Coach Yost just was not able to really get the defense to go, and he had to suck it up and stop being about his pride and instead turned to Coach Herman Boone and asked him for help. Netanyahu needs to ask for some help from his allies and come with a better option than what they've got. And it's just going to continue to fall apart. But it's ironic considering the parallels between we have one person in power, one person running for power, both trying to stay out of the courts and trying to avoid facing justice for the wrongs that they have done.
Meaning Trump and Netanyahu.
Yes, with the same attitude. Nobody's going to preach to me. You're a public servant. They are supposed to preach to you, and you're supposed to listen and take that into account when you make decisions.
Well,
Youssef,
Netanyahu publicly...
Youssef, before you go, how does the world and the African world in particular factor into this? South Africa was leading in trying to pursue a peace settlement or a ceasefire, and also the condemnation of Israel's military assault on the Palestinian people. And a number of international courts, at least one international court, has condemned the Israeli invasion, but condemned both sides for atrocities. How does the international community weigh in on what's at stake here in the Middle East?
Well, the United Nations has been the primary route for expressions of displeasure, calls for a ceasefire immediately, and shame on Israel as a result of all of the unnecessary deaths and injuries and destruction that have occurred. The question that no one is asking is, who's going to be responsible for providing the billions to rebuild what has been destroyed? You know, the infrastructure, the roads, the schools, the hospitals, the housing,
The
the
orchards.
displacement of 1.8 million people. You know, does Israel expect that the allies are going to provide the resources to rebuild the destruction that Israel has created? I mean, at some point, if an election were held today in Israel, it is very doubtful that Netanyahu would be reelected or could gather enough of the parties to hold power in the Knesset. With his attacks on the power of the Israeli Supreme Court, with his singular statements about, you know, don't preach to me, there'll never be a two-party state in my lifetime, and we'll go it alone if necessary with this battle all the way to the end, and we're going to open the gates of hell in Gaza for the October 7th attack on Israeli soil, which the Israeli government knew about. They've been very quiet about the fact that Israel has been serving as a go-through for funding for Hamas for years, millions of dollars, assuming that as long as the leadership had money, that there would be peace between Israel and Palestine, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. And Hamas came to power because of the corruption of the prior party that was responsible for law enforcement, for government, and for monitoring and overseeing the actions of the Palestinian people in the West Bank and Gaza. I mean, Hamas basically just took over the leadership and ran the former leaders out. But Hamas has got support from a number of countries in the Middle East and possibly some African countries who view the Palestinian people, the Iranian people, the Egyptian people as people of color and as allies. The United States has 83 bases, military bases in Africa. China and Russia have an equal number. Okay, everybody's after the resources in Russia because they're necessary for the smartphones, for the smart
In
TVs,
Africa.
for the Christmas toys, for half of the appliances in the kitchen and in the basement are run, you know, are online connected wirelessly to Wi-Fi. And that wouldn't be possible without these resources that are basically being, you know, scooped off the surface in these countries in Africa for pennies on the dollar in terms of the amount that the people, I won't say leaders, the people in leadership positions in those countries are receiving, not that is going to assist and is mutually beneficial, both for the people reaping, I take the E out, and it would be the same effect of the word reaping, and exploiting the richness of these countries. So there are connections. We don't receive a lot of information. Here's a real challenge. We don't have problems. We have challenges and opportunities. We do not receive a lot of information coming from beyond the geographic borders of the United States, unless it's coming from someone in a leadership position within the government or within Congress. Now, Blinken, our Secretary of State, has made a dozen trips to the Middle East, not just to Israel, but to Saudi Arabia, to Iran, to other countries, trying to broker some type of a peace deal with the blessings of Joe Biden, you know. And there are international discussions about why does America continue to provide these arms that are causing this death in Palestinian occupied territories. But what we hear is the United States position and what comes from the Republican side of Congress or from progressives in Congress, you know, the Squad or Bernie Sanders have been, you know, the only few to really speak out on this. The others have, you know, raised their hand to support any request that Israel had. The request for money last year, Congress gave them twice what they were requesting. And 100% of the members in both parties voted to approve it.
Mhm.
So again, the Christian right, the Christian Zionists, the Christian evangelists, the Republicans, and Trump didn't take over the Republican Party. He revealed it, okay? Because that party has steadfastly stood beside Israel without regard for what atrocities or death or damage it was incurred or resulted. And they will continue to do so. So we have a divided Congress. We have divided positions among the presidential contenders. Biden was not supported by Netanyahu. Netanyahu has supported, Trump has supported Netanyahu, and Netanyahu has supported him and would like nothing better than to see him in the White House again, okay, so he can further solidify his base of support with the United States. And AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, has played an important role in the election of pro-Israel candidates around the United States. And interestingly, as was mentioned last week, this year they did not provide support for Don Samuels, although they provided significant assault in his similar campaign, where he came within 2,500 votes of defeating Ilhan Omar. So this year, AIPAC did not support Donald Samuels. They felt their money was better spent elsewhere with the likelihood of success.
And for those who don't know, Don Samuels, former city council member for the city of Minneapolis from the North Side Black community, also former member of the Minneapolis School Board, was again challenging the incumbent Ilhan Omar for the Congressional District number 5 seat, a seat that was held by Keith Ellison before he retired from federal government to run for state office and become the Attorney General. Ilhan becoming the second Muslim, I think, maybe, or certainly the second from Minnesota, with Keith being the first to serve in the U.S. Congress, and succeeded by a Muslim woman, Ilhan Omar, a Somali American woman. So
Keith received 25,000 votes in his last victory in the 5th Ward. Ilhan Omar received 75,000 votes in her first attempt to gain that seat. She blanketed the 5th Ward and knocked on doors 5 times, and is a very able opponent. That seat is pretty critical and pretty well earned. But we're seeing.
Jonathan, jump in.
Well, part of the issue has been that since the 20th century, the U.S. foreign policy has always included 3 elements: oil, Israel, and a phantom menace that can be used to scare people into going ahead and moving whatever direction the politics wants you to.
Sit with that. I love that. Sit with that for a minute. Just go into, for instance, what do you mean?
For instance, we have oil. Is everything centers around that as an import, and the kind of deals we make with Saudi Arabia, the kind of deals that get pushed forward, these ideas of drilling on Native American land and all in Alaska and all over the place. I mean, there are so many pieces of what drives the policy in the U.S. that is centered around that versus looking at more alternative fuels, more alternative sources, and things that we could do. And it forces deals.
Would you call that, Jonathan, a practice and a policy of extraction as a modus operandi? How we do business, we extract resources from the earth, from populations, including human beings, right, from their environment, and repurpose them. Obviously, the mineral and oil elements, but also human. Go ahead, you said.
We are now extracting more oil in the United States than from any of the foreign partners from whom we import. With fracking, with the leasing of national park and public lands across the country. The production of oil has skyrocketed. It's interesting that the price hasn't gone down as a result. I think it has become stable because of the reserves and because of the supply that we're now obtaining from the United States itself. That extraction has been accelerated to the point where we no longer rely solely on the import of foreign oil to run and operate American industry and automobiles.
But you mentioned, Yusef, extraction in the context of resources, mineral resources throughout the continent of Africa and probably
Correct.
also in South America. So in a sense, though we use the word oil to begin with, it's still the process of exploitation of assets that kind of guides our policy, correct?
Clearly. That's why we have those 83 military bases on the continent, to maintain stability and peace in those, there are 54 independent nations in Africa. And when you look at a globe or at a map, the United States is proportional to its size. Africa is greatly reduced. The United States and 5 other European countries would fit inside the African continent in terms of the mass. But Africa is not a country, it's a continent, and there are 54 independent nations on the continent of Africa, which a lot of people tend to forget. And North Africa is part of the Middle East, okay, because Israel is just across the water from the northern tip of Africa. And Africa has relationships with all of those countries that surround Israel because they trade in both directions with Northern Africa and with other parts of Africa for resources and precious minerals.
But that is the problem. The extraction goes back to the birth of the transatlantic slave trade. And so what you see as a consistent piece is the U.S. going over and extracting resources, people, oil, other things that have led to continual problems across history and across our time. You look at this same problem that started over 400 years ago, and continues to this day, where we base what we do. We become beholden to people outside. We take advantage of people outside, and at the same time want to lock down the borders to keep certain people outside. It is a pattern with the United States where it looks towards control. It looks towards wealth, and for certain segments of our population. And that piece about the 3 elements, we focus in on always supporting Israel. We focus in on always getting oil. And the Phantom Menace is this thing that goes from, it was communism, and then it was nuclear war, and it's terrorism, and it just evolves. But it's the same thing that is always there, of why you have to support the policy that U.S. does in other parts of the world that is detrimental to both the U.S. and other parts of the world. But if you don't, this boogeyman is going to come out and destroy your way of life and take away the things that you have.
And who owns the majority of U.S. debt, Jonathan, Al? You know who it is?
China. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Which limits how aggressive.
So what does it mean? What does that mean?
It limits how aggressive or forceful the United States can be toward China, okay, in terms of the theft of trade secrets, offering to invest in companies, but getting, their trade secrets as part of their due process for investing, and then stealing those secrets and implementing them in China. We see the same thing in Russia. The theft of what's called intellectual property, okay, occurring daily. The hacking of major government computer systems, governments, banks, so on and so forth. And, it puts us in a severely limited position in terms of what kind of leverage we have or what we can demand. It's kind of like, gee whiz, we like you, won't you please like us back? Okay, and eventually we hope to contribute some payment toward the reduction of the debt that we have that you hold.
Well, and that's also a piece where China has been buying up land across the continent of Africa and putting out not warehouses, but building out infrastructure out there, employing people, investing in it, buying loyalty, endeavoring to create a path for them to be the superpower that surpasses the U.S. And they're doing it in a way that is out in the open, but can't be, as you said, you can't really push back against it because they own our debt and because capitalism is the way that so many people in the U.S. push as the right thing.
It's the polite version of what the Russians did in Cuba.
Mm-hmm. Let me pivot a little bit. I'm pulling up an article from Reuters, and the headline is that Harris courts union vote with Biden at her side. It's an article by Jeff Mason and Steve Holland and Kanishka Singh, published about 12 hours ago, September 3rd, in mid-afternoon or so. And the article, I'll read a couple of paragraphs of it. Dateline is Pittsburgh, September 2nd. It says Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris said on Monday that U.S. steel should remain in domestic hands. She made a pitch alongside President Joe Biden to working class voters in Pennsylvania who are also being courted by her rival. The event yesterday, Labor Day, a U.S. holiday, signifies the start of post-summer sprint to the November 5th election, and it marked Harris and Biden's first appearance together at a campaign rally since she officially became the Democratic nominee. Harris used the campaign events on Monday in Michigan, Pennsylvania, two battleground states, to court the crucial labor vote at a packed Union Hall. In Pittsburgh, she echoed Biden's concern over U.S. Steel Corp being acquired by Japan's Nippon Steel. U.S. Steel is a historic American company and is vital to our nation's to maintain strong American steel companies. Harris said at the rally, U.S. Steel should remain American owned and American operated. Biden said Harris will build on the progress they had made during his administration to improve the lives of union workers, that he would do anything, everything he could do to help. I'll be on the sidelines, he said, but he obviously is going to be there supporting her. So the Harris campaign has sought to appeal to union workers in much the same way that Biden has throughout his presidency. The Democrats aim to keep union workers from being tempted to vote for former Republican President Donald Trump, who they say also has some blue-collar appeal. At the rally in Pittsburgh, Todd Hammer, 48, said he thought Biden's support for labor would help Harris. She's new, Hammer said. We're all still learning about her, but she does have a deep history, and I think that she's going to continue to stand by labor leaders and unions to help support unions and their cause. Well, let me stop there. So, let's look at the campaign. Jonathan, let you jump in first. We talked about the impact of the Israel-Hamas conflict on local politics, but here is a question about the unions and workers. What are you reading? What are you hearing?
Well, the unions have always been a good, strong backbone of the American industry, and one of the largest issues that gets kind of skirted around with this is the fact that too many corporations, rather than focusing in on union labor, focusing in on American investment, go ahead and find cheaper labor in other parts of the world. And then claim tax cuts on the things that they do with that and make more money, while people who are the average citizens that could use those jobs are left standing out in the cold. We really should be looking at this more and looking at how we can address. Um, I don't necessarily want to call it penalizing, but uh, discouraging from going out and investing, moving your accounts to the Cayman Islands, and all the different kinds of things that people do where they can get labor, but they're exploiting the labor in those other countries, and it just perpetuates the cycle. If you really care about American industry, if you really care about an American worker, then even if it costs you a little bit more, you should be willing to take a cut off your $15 million paycheck and invest that into the company so that people can have a living wage within the United States.
Yusuf, what you think?
Well, most of the unions have come out and endorsed Harris and Walz, except the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, one of the largest unions.
Mm-hmm.
And their position is that until they meet with her and interview her and ask her what she intends to do about their legislative policies, their priorities for their membership, they're not going to give out an endorsement until they've thoroughly vetted Harris-Walz campaign to see how it aligns with their personal priorities. The other reality is that Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, and most of the states in the eastern half of the United States are solidly union states and solidly occupied in the workforce by union members. Now tends to diminish as you go west, with the exception of going around the southern coast and then up the western coast, California, Oregon, Washington State have a lot of workers. Boeing, the oil industry in Texas, and 40 million people in California. You've got a lot of healthcare unions. You've got educators. The largest law enforcement union in California are the people who provide security in the prisons. But the union vote is critical for a presidential campaign, okay, for the popular vote, all right, and may have some influence on the electoral vote if the union's members do vote unanimously with whoever the leadership in the union or the membership endorse. So Harris and Walz are necessarily courting every union vote, every union that they can get, and we're going to see that continue. I think their interview with the Teamsters is scheduled for 2 weeks, 10 days or 2 weeks from now, and then the Teamsters will come out and endorse after they've finished vetting. They've already done the Trump campaign, which probably didn't take more than 5 minutes, but we'll see what happens.
What do you expect to happen?
I expect them to endorse Harris-Walz campaign, and I think that's going to be a big boost financially. It's going to be a big boost in terms of feet on the ground, volunteering and working with the Harris-Walz campaign. And the financial piece is a critical one, because wherever they have a presence, they're not just going to sit idly by and say, oh yeah, we support Walz and Harris. They're going to get out there and buy ads and put feet on the ground and put literature in people's screen doors and really work to get that candidate that they support elected. They always have, they always will. It's in their best interest. They can't just endorse and then take a walk.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is a conversation with Al McFarlane. My partners today in this conversation, my companions, are Jonathan Palmer and Ndugu Yusuf Mjini. Jonathan, go ahead.
Oh, just a quick note. I appreciate Sean O'Brien's position, and I've liked him. The way he stood up to Senator Sean Mullins in Congress, the speech he gave at the RNC. I mean, they invited him to speak, and he gave a nice anti-big business speech, and that must have been very shocking for everybody at the RNC. And so I have appreciated the hardball way in which he prays, and it's fair to say, we want to interview Kamala, but I agree that it's going to end up where Youssef says that it will end up with an endorsement, just because of her positions alone and the alignment.
What are your thoughts? What do you expect when you watch the debate between the two presidential candidates next week? I think a week from tonight or tomorrow night. Talk about that for a second, Youssef. What do you think?
Chaos. I think that we'll see characteristic performance by Mr. Trump, and it'll be a good opportunity for candidate Harris to share her vision, her priorities, and her sought-after presidency with millions of people in the United States who will be watching. The president Mr. Trump has extreme difficulty staying on script. Okay, and I say chaos because within 2 to 3 minutes into the debate, he's going to come out of right field, with one of his crazy statements and blame the Harris-Biden administration for every bad smell in the United States. And the fact checkers are going to have a very busy night. In his debate with Biden, he told 74 lies in 45 minutes. Okay, and it was so bad that one journalist raised the old question: how do you know when Mr. Trump is lying? And the reply was, his lips are moving. So I say chaos because I do not expect a civil and balanced discourse. I expect, and if both microphones are left on instead of muted when the other candidate is not speaking, it's going to be a shootout, a free for all. But thank you to Michelle Delicious and Bob's Reward for joining us and for contributing today. Always good to see you.
Yep. Thank you.
And I agree with Youssef. I think that Trump is not ready for Kamala Harris. I think that, he's already been seeding out stuff saying, oh, she's going to call me a racist. He's already trying to negate things that he thinks she's going to do. But he is not ready for Kamala Harris. He is not ready for what she will bring as a former prosecutor, as a woman of color, as somebody who has been on the stage for quite a while and knows what she's doing.
He's not capable.
Nope.
Well, I think it makes it exciting. We'll see what the fallout's going to be after this, and we'll have us come back and just continue to do analysis and conversation around it. Listen, brothers, great conversation. Good to see you both again. This has been a good discussion. And for those who are listening, we thank you for listening. Thank you for checking us out online at YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn. We'll be here again next week. In fact, we live stream every day, so you can come back to the Insight News social media platforms and YouTube every day at 1 o'clock for the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm your host. We'll see you next time. Take care. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Youssef.
Thank you. Take care.